Good morning. I have to speak quickly because Carlton is broadcasting this. He's also keeping time, and he cuts to commercial at 15 minutes. I am a civil rights attorney. I make no apologies for that fact. The goals in the presentation today are to discuss how civil rights and environmental justice laws and principles are available as planning tools. How are these civil rights and environmental justice issues? Water in Flint, parks and beaches, climate justice. What does any of this have to do with the civil rights revolution? What's the Pope have to do with it? And what does all this have to do with smart growth and equitable development? And I hope to tell a story that engages you. Even though I am an attorney, we don't rely so much on words, but on pictures. President Barack Obama, in October of 2014, came to Los Angeles and recognized when he dedicated the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument. We heard from the community. Too many children, especially children of color, don't have access to parks where they can run free, breathe fresh air, experience nature, and learn about their environment. This is an issue of social justice because it's not enough to have this awesome natural wonder within your sight. You have to be able to access it. And he said, my commitment to conservation is about working with communities to open up our glorious heritage to everybody, young and old, black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American, to make sure everybody can experience these incredible gifts. And the White House statement explicitly recognized that access to parks and beaches is a health issue, it is an economic issue, it is more than an environmental issue. The President of the United States just did a social impact analysis. It's not rocket science. He's got all the elements there that each of the two previous speakers referred to. We're very proud of that moment. We've been working on that for 15 years. And when the mainstream environmentalists invited the president to create that national monument, as part of the San Gabriel Mountains Forever campaign, we wrote directly to the president and said, if you create the national monument and don't recognize the disparities in health access and park access and environmental justice and social justice issues and civil rights issues, it will be a victory for the mainstream environmentalists, but it will not be a victory for the community. The mainstream environmentalists almost kicked us out of the campaign for accusing us of trying to blow up the effort to create the monument. So we were very fortunate that John Podesta, who was counsel to the president at the time, wrote me a personal note saying the president appreciated hearing from the community and followed up with his words and actions. We still lost our funding from that campaign. I'm sorry you can't see this better. It's not just about Los Angeles. It's not just about California. The city project has mapped the entire state of California at the census tract level to show the disparities the president recognized. There's not enough parks and beach access, especially in communities of color and low-income communities. Second, there are health disparities based on those factors. And third, civil rights and environmental justice laws and principles require agencies and recipients of federal funding to alleviate those disparities. US EPA, to their credit, have issued EJ Screen a few months ago. They mapped the entire nation to show where toxics and pollutions are, who are the communities that are most vulnerable, and they do it in terms of race, color, national origin. We've been working with US EPA on their online tool. You can enter your own data. We entered our data for California to show EPA parks are an environmental justice and civil rights issue too. EPA agrees, and they assured us that in the April edition, parks and recreation will be included for this entire nation. That's more than the state of California is willing to do to this day. The state of California's Cal Enviro screen excludes parks and recreation and excludes people of color. That's Parks and Recreation. That is a social impact analysis. That's how you do it. This is the water in Flint, in a hospital in Flint, recently. What does this have to do with parks and recreation? The World Health Organization defines human health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely alleviating chronic diseases. This includes obesity and diabetes. And the World Health Organization emphasizes that the social determinants of health are more important than individual habits like eating or exercise, and more important than the amount of money spent on healthcare. What are the social determinants of health? I was on a conference call with a bunch of funders and academics and social scientists, and they were throwing that term around. I said, what are the social determinants of health? And George Flores from the California Endowment said, Robert, it's what you do. It's where people live, learn, work, play, pray. And as I'm learning more and more, where they age. Tom Perez, who is now Secretary of Labor, previously Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the Justice Department, before that, Civil Rights Head at Health and Human Services, U.S. Health and Human Services, wrote this in a book by the Institute of Medicine. Discrimination is a root cause of health disparities, and a comprehensive strategy to eliminate disparities must incorporate a strong civil rights component. We're still trying to persuade the Centers for Disease Control, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Justice Department, state agencies in California of the truth of this statement. When Carlton asked me to speak here today, again, what does Flint Water have to do with parks and recreation and civil rights? When Carlton asked me to speak, I simply went online and I typed in Flint Water Title VI, expecting I would find nothing. The first thing that pops up is the City of Flint's Title VI Non-Discrimination Plan, 2013, it's current. I said, thank goodness they have a Title VI plan. Why didn't this prevent the problems from happening? The answer is, as a condition of receiving federal funding, Flint has to do a Title VI plan. But US EPA doesn't take it seriously. US EPA hasn't investigated or found discrimination in any administrative complaint in 40 years.
46 years.
46 years, but who's counting? There is currently a lawsuit pending against US EPA for its failure to investigate administrative complaints raising environmental justice issues. So there is the plan. You're asking yourselves, well, if I read that, it's 50 pages long. I don't understand it. The people who put it together don't understand it. We've been meeting with US EPA officials for 3 years. US EPA at the top level tells us, we don't know how to do an environmental justice plan. Help us. It's not rocket science. Health and Human Services and Stanford University published this a number of years ago. They talk about Title VI, two kinds of discrimination. One is intentional discrimination, what they call disparate treatment, and the other is disparate impact discrimination, regardless of intent. If the impact hurts people of color and low-income people, it doesn't matter what you intended to do. The path to hell is paved with good intentions. When you look at environmental impact assessments and the impact on the pocket mouse, you don't ask, does the developer intend to hurt the pocket mouse? So disparate impact is a form of discrimination. The US Supreme Court affirmed that last year in one of the 3 most important decisions of the year. Everybody here can identify the gay marriage case as one of the most important decisions, and the Affordable Care Act case is one of the most important decisions. Virtually nobody knows that the US Supreme Court upheld the disparate impact standard under the Fair Housing Act. The same day of the last day of the session. What does disparate impact treatment or intent, what does disparate impact, what does disparate treatment or intent, what does disparate impact mean? Japs keep moving. This is a white man's neighborhood. West Hollywood, 1940s. Los Angeles pioneered the use of racially restrictive housing covenants. That's why you have the continuing legacy and pattern of discriminatory land use, with people of color living in environmentally degraded neighborhoods with toxics and no parks, and white wealthy people just living on the west side near the beach, near the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, because of that continuing history and pattern. That's what we call as attorneys smoking gun evidence of intent. The disparate impact is a little bit harder, but it's still not rocket science. We frame it in positive terms. Carlton loves this 5-point plan, and it's consistent with what each of the speakers said. 1, explain what you plan to do in terms people understand. Are you going to promote park and beach access? Are you going to promote clean, healthy water in Flint? Are you going to promote climate justice all over the world? 2, analyze the burdens, toxics and pollution. Analyze the benefits. Who gets clean water? The people of Troy, Michigan, or the people of Flint? Who gets park access? South Central LA, less than half an acre of parks per 1,000 residents? Or West LA, 62 acres of parks per 1,000 residents? Analyze the alternatives. Instead of getting the water from the Flint River in Michigan, why don't you get it out of Lake Huron, like wealthy white people and General Motors do? 4, include people of color and low-income people in the planning process. This is what we wrote to the president about, and he included us. Gave me a front row seat when he did the monument dedication. 5, and this is critical, this is where cities like Flint drop the ball. You have to implement a plan to distribute the benefits and burdens fairly and avoid intentional discrimination and unjustified discriminatory impacts. Most of you should remember that 5-point plan and apply it to what you do. Most of you won't. Most of you will remember the picture of the president and me. There's Lyndon Johnson signing the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which says if you receive federal funding, you must avoid intentional discrimination, you must avoid discriminatory impacts. It's not rocket science. President Kennedy, when he sent that Title VI to Congress, said, simple justice requires that people of all, taxpayers of all races contribute. Simple justice requires that public funds to which all taxpayers of all races contribute not be spent in any fashion that encourages, entrenches, subsidizes, or results in, there is your impact, racial discrimination. Senator Hubert Humphrey, who ran it through Congress, through the Senate, said, we do not have to be lawyers to understand do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Similarly, President's Order 12898 on environmental justice and health. What does that mean? Environmental justice embraces the principle that all people and communities are entitled to equal protection of our environmental, health, employment, education, housing, transportation, and civil rights laws. It's the golden rule. Dr. Robert Bullard has summarized that. He's the father of environmental justice. Denise Miller Travis is the mother. I'm not suggesting there's anything going on between Bob and Denise. President Clinton signing the EJ order. What's the Pope have to do with this? Access to safe, drinkable water is a basic and universal human right. Is the Pope Latino? What's climate have to do with it? People of color and low-income people in California, in the nation, throughout the world, suffer first and worst from climate change. And the Pope recognizes this in his encyclical when he says, there is not two crises, one environmental and one social. We must have one solution where you hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor and underserved. The president who recognizes these things and the Pope agree. The City Project has been saying these things for 15 years. We're proud we influenced the president. We can't take credit for influencing the Pope, but we agree with them. Again, this is not rocket science. 18-year-old college freshman prepared this comic book, Take Action Comics, The City Project. Summarizes how these are civil rights issues and what you can do. It's available on our website. There's a flyer about it floating around. My time is up. The City Project is a nonprofit organization. Donations are tax deductible. Thank you very much for your time.
So was that exhilarating or not?